Today, I'm going to share with you a new method to uncover prospect needs and pain points that you can use to precisely target marketing content and messaging for exactly the right buyers. And we're going to be using AI to help synthesize a lot of information, which makes this a great process for teams who have limited resources and budgets. So I'm excited to share this with you. My name is Kris Skavish, and I am the co-CEO of 2 Octobers. And I've been advising businesses on digital marketing strategy for more than 15 years. In my work as a digital marketing strategist, I spend a lot of time thinking about how to help B2B businesses connect with their target audiences and drive sales. And messaging and content is often at the top of my list of things we need to evaluate and improve. A good foundation of content fuels all sorts of digital campaigns. It can be used for ad copy. It can be used for social media, for videos, for website to improve conversions. But we also need to be careful when we're talking about content creation that we're really creating something that has real value, because we don't want to be creating just more heaps of content and launching it into the world. So how do we do that? We like to advise clients that the best way to create content that really resonates is to take the intersection of what your prospects' pain points and questions are and what your brand expertise is. So if you combine those together, you've got a way of approaching content that is unique to only your brand, and that's your content tilt. So that's the holy grail that we're aiming for when we're creating content as marketers for your brand. The thing I've always found challenging about this advice is, how do we get that deep information about prospect pain points and questions? How can we understand what that looks like as people move through the funnel? So that's what we're going to talk about today. We have a method of doing this that starts with really reimagining what buyer personas are, how we can define them to make them more useful for the content marketing process. And it starts with expanding the voice of prospect research that you do. So I'll talk about how you can gather that information in places that you might not have thought of. Then the next step is to use AI to synthesize all that data that you're going to have access to. So I'll talk about what's worked in that process. But then we need to go back to humans. We use humans to prioritize what we've developed from that process. And what kind of impact do we have when we pull all those things together into a strategic content marketing plan? That's what we'll talk about today. Let's start out with the challenge. I think that understanding buyer needs is challenging for marketers. It's advice that you hear a lot, and we're really supposed to be just, swimming in that kind of information. But I find that marketers are really disconnected from real prospects and customers. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Sometimes it's hard to get information from the people who own the customers. The customer service team in our organization doesn't know what information to share with us or how. The same for the sales organization. And of course, you can do traditional audience research, but that can be expensive and time consuming. So is there another way to do this and think about this? When we work with marketing teams, a lot of times what we see from them as foundational documents about their audience look like one of these two things. So on the left, we've got your target audience definition. So it's a list of industries, a list of job titles, a list of target companies that you want to go after. And that can be, of course, useful for marketing. It's really great for advertising targeting. It's a good foundation and place to start when thinking about who our prospects are and what kind of information they need. The other typical document that you might see is a traditional persona definition. And this is really a representation of an audience by sort of making it one prototype of a person, and we give that person a name. Her name is Sarah, and she's 27, and she's got a bachelor's in finance. And there's a lot of information here, and it is useful for marketing, no doubt, but I have not found it as useful for content marketing and messaging development, because to me, it's not specific enough about how they are thinking about the buying process and filling their needs by looking at whatever solution you have to offer them. So it doesn't help me understand where they're at in the buying funnel and how I can apply content and messaging to support them. So what I want to encourage you to do is to reimagine buyer personas so that they're focusing specifically on prospect pain points and questions. And so what does that look like? If we do that, if we reimagine personas around buyer questions, then what we're seeing about each of these roles of people who are stakeholders in the buying process is, what are some of their key concerns related to this product and the problem that your product or service tries to solve? So in this case, this financial analyst has a reporting task to do, and she's wondering what's causing the inefficiencies that make me take so much time to do this. Is it possible that a tool could save meaningful time? And is it possible that I could still get quality of output without having to spend so much time at it? Then if we can expand what's available in this persona to specific questions that this person is asking as they become aware of a tool set that might be able to serve their needs, as they start to consider whether they really want to purchase a product or service to fill these needs or not, and then as they're getting to the final stages of the decisions, what information do they need to finalize their decision? This becomes much more useful for actually developing a strategic content strategy. It helps us to know exactly what people need across the different stakeholders in the purchasing process, so that as marketers, we can develop messages and develop content that answer those questions and help them along through the purchase process. We have developed a process that helps us take a lot of data inputs and develop a more expanded persona, really focused around this idea of buyer questions. When you do persona research traditionally, you might do things like hold a focus group or do a survey, do some persona interviews, do some customer interviews. All of those things are really great sources of information, and they're still worth doing. As I mentioned, they can be expensive, and that's not always accessible to all teams. So in the process of doing this, we really tried to expand our ideas of where prospect research could come from. Where could we tap into that voice of the prospect and collect information from them about how they're thinking about problems at different phases of the buying cycle? And so what we see is that we can connect with people who are actual buyers of the product or service that we have by taking a look at the RFP questions and answers that our business does in the course of our business, by looking at sales calls and taking transcripts from those to see what people are talking about on those calls, to take transcripts from win-loss calls that some sales teams do after they've won or lost business to see why they succeeded or failed. And also from customer interviews. We can also find insights from researchers, people who are earlier in the buying cycle, by looking at discussions that are happening on Reddit and Quora, by looking at search queries, by looking at also asked information, which is traditional in SEO research. And then also by looking at questions and asked and answers provided on private communities, on forums, on Slack communities. The other thing that I think is valuable is also to think about how thought leaders can contribute to the information you have about how prospects are thinking about problems. I find that thought leaders who might be competitors at other companies, they might be heads of positions inside of associations that your business serves, they can actually be in this sort of advisory situation where prospects are looking for advice about how to solve particular problems. And that is another way of surfacing what some pain points are along the buying process. So looking at information that happens inside of podcasts, conference presentations, YouTube videos, and even publications. So if you're anything like me, you're already at the core of the problem I'm presenting here, which is, oh my gosh, that's a lot of information. How can I possibly manage getting all this information and understanding it and applying it and really honing it down into specific buyer questions? And that is something that AI is particularly good at. As we've been experimenting with different use cases for AI in our agencies, this is one of my favorite things to do with AI, which is to give it a ton of information and have it help me organize and synthesize that information into something that's more usable. So here's what we did in this project. We took research from all of those different places. We got transcripts from different things, and we uploaded that into AI in several different phases. And what we did is we asked AI to structure and organize the information in the following ways. First, in the information we've given you, can you give me a list of the needs that people have? What are they describing as their needs? Second, can you reframe each of those as a question? So if I have a need to, for example, decrease my reporting time, then my reframing that as a question might look like, what are some ways that I could decrease reporting time for this kind of deliverable? Then we ask it to categorize the question by buyer stage and journey, and generally sort of what topic area it is, which helps with organizing that later. We also, and I think this is really important, we ask it to retain exact quotes from the source material. We know that one of the problems with AI is that occasionally it can make up its own information. And so making sure that when it is rewriting things in the way we're asking it to, that it is actually basing that on a real quote from the source material, I think is really important. So what do you get out of this process? Well, it's really fun because one of the things you get is this gigantic list of questions, and that is really a source of endless content ideas. The other thing is that you get an organized set of quotes from the sources. So you're retaining the exact need as they phrased it. And I think being able to speak to your target users in the nomenclature that they use to talk about their needs and problems and ideas is really important for marketing. What we've done is used all of that information to develop a new persona definition based on what each role wants to know as they progress through the buying funnel. So now instead of this demographically oriented persona that is traditional, we have a persona that says this type of buyer likes to know these kinds of things as they go through each stage in the buying process. And that has a direct map to how we want to develop messaging and content to connect with those buyers and help them make good decisions about our products and services going forward. So what do we do with that gigantic list? Well, this is where humans come back into the process. You can use AI to help you prioritize that gigantic list of questions and say how many questions there are per topic and things like that. But we really need to use human intelligence to come back to that sweet spot, to find the perfect way to use these buyer questions with your particular content tilt. So the question to ask here is, where do competitive gaps and product differentiators point to content that we should be prioritizing? So what we found is that a lot of times these questions lead obviously to, hey, they have a lot of questions around this particular topic, and we know our product excels in this area beyond other competitors. So we really want to make sure that we've saturated the content around that area because it really highlights our differentiator more specifically. And then the other thing I would look at is what patterns are we seeing in questions that multiple personas ask. So it is very common in B2B for there to be more than one stakeholder who is involved in the buying process. And when two people have the same kind of question, I think that's an excellent opportunity to dive into that as a content area to talk about. So if you're going to talk about the return on investment, if you know that your multiple personas have questions about the return on investment and how long it'll take to get our return on investment on this purchase, that's a great topic to cover. And you need to cover it with two tilts. One tilt towards the person who's going to be using the product and one person who has the budget for the product. And that becomes two ways to address the same topic. When you select a topic, it's really important to make the topic. We're not going to write a blog, post it on social media, and call it done. This is another place that we find AI to be particularly useful, is helping us to merge a couple ideas. So take this topic idea of what's the return on investment time for purchasing this product. So you've got maybe your CFO for the budget persona and your finance analyst for the user persona. How would each of those personas be interested in thinking about the ROI question differently? And what are two ways we could approach a blog, a LinkedIn post, a video that address that topic differently for those different target audiences? The reason that this is so important to think about right now is actually related to the other side of AI, and that's visibility in AI. We know that when people are interacting with AI tools to help them with the business purchasing process. So I'm asking it to advise who are the top companies to provide me with this reporting solution. AI is using the history that I've put into interacting with it and all the details I put behind that prompt before they answer that question. And so if I've said, we're a 10-person firm and we serve high net worth clients and I only need to do about 10 reports a month, that's a different set of user needs than if I am somebody who has to create 100 reports a month and we serve mid-level clients. Users of AI tools are putting that kind of context into their questions because it generates more specific answers. How does it generate more specific answers? Because it's finding the right connected content out there amongst hopefully your content, because you've written good content that is specifically oriented towards your target audience. So creating more of that custom content for exactly the type of buyers that you want to find is going to help you get found in AI more frequently going forward. So that is a really big reason why it's valuable to spend that kind of time on content customization at this stage in the game. The other way that you can use AI is to create a more efficient content production process so that it's easier for you to reframe this content and to customize it for each of the platforms that you're posting it on, not simply reposting the same thing in the same place. So if you can develop an understanding of how the people who follow you on Instagram are different than the people who follow you on LinkedIn, you can customize your messaging to each of them fairly easily with the help of AI. Again, it just makes small teams so much more powerful to be able to augment what you're doing with AI. So as I said, we're doing this with a client right now. What has been the impact for that client? Number one is really a deeper understanding of buyers and a better content market fit. So I think we have a much better grounding in all of the questions that people are asking, which is going to help us create much better, more accurate content. We've got a deeper well of content and messaging ideas that we know are a fit for the personas. And we've got really a much easier route to repurposing content for different personas and different distribution, different platforms. So ultimately, we are already to create more content that connects with different specific buyer roles so that we're connecting with more of our target audience in different ways and generating more interest for the product that we're marketing. So we're really excited about the depth of the work that we've done here and how it's going to help enable much better marketing in 2026. Thanks for joining us today.